I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey lurkers, I first want to say I am sorry for not getting part 2 out last week to you. Last week I was at an evening camp for scouts, so I got up at 6, went to work, got home, had about an hour to find something to eat and change, and then I had to head over to camp. And then I left camp around 8:45, 9 o'clock, got home, changed, and basically went to bed. That's what I did Monday through Friday. I had Saturday, and then Sunday I left for overnight camp. So I was sleeping in a tent for 48 hours. And I've had Wednesday, Thursday, which is tonight when I'm recording, I had to go back to camp for their campfire program and barbecue. And so I'm finally recording. And tomorrow I am leaving again. So it's been a little nuts here, and I apologize for that. Before we get started with the episode, I do want to put it out there that I am looking for your input. I'm looking for your suggestions on how I might be able to improve the podcast. So if you have a suggestion, send it to me via email at lurkpodcast@yahoo.com or message me through our social media accounts. Make sure any criticism is constructive. I am not in the mood for trolls. So if you don't have anything constructive to say, keep it to yourself. Now this week we are continuing our look at the Welsh house known as Heol Fanog, also called the Welsh Amityville. And it has the distinction of being the most exorcised house in Britain. When we ended last episode, the Rich family, consisting of Bill, his wife Liz, Bill's 14-year-old son from another marriage, Lawrence, and Bill and Liz's infant son Ben, were experiencing footsteps, strange smells, and the apparition of an old woman. They had a priest come and perform a cleansing, or exorcism, if you will, which only gave them a few days of peace before things started up again. Lawrence still continues his nasty behavior, leading Bill to believe his son is possessed. They try to get government assistance in getting housing somewhere else, but they are denied. And Bill wakes up with his fingers split open and bleeding. Liz is pretty much frantic at this point, and she makes a call to her friend, who's a medium. The friend directed her to the Christian Spiritualist Church and Ray Williams. When Liz spoke to Ray Williams, he told her Lawrence should be removed from the house for his own sake, and suggested Lawrence could be responsible for the poltergeist-like activity. This was also my initial thought, as teens with a lot of emotions, like anger, can trigger that kind of phenomena, but they can't conjure apparitions. Between April and June in 1990, Lawrence was spitting, swearing, and was overall terribly unpleasant, according to Bill and Liz. And at this time, Liz learns that she is pregnant again. In April 1990, Ray Williams visits the house. He was a plump man, 55 years old, and accompanied by a man named Larry Harry. I didn't make that up, that is this person's name. And another man from the Christian Spiritualist Church in Cardiff. Williams again says that he feels that Lawrence is the cause. He said Lawrence was a confused individual likely to have been responsible for sparking poltergeist phenomena. Williams felt it would be best to send Lawrence away, though he stressed that that wouldn't stop the activity, but it would help Lawrence. Bill and Liz have their auras cleansed by having the hands of the spiritualists move around their bodies about 6 inches away, so they weren't touching them. This is something that I actually have encountered, back in high school in health class. It's basically energy work, similar to Reiki, and I'm going to say that it actually can work. Liz explained that she and Lawrence were close and got along, and she wasn't looking to get rid of him. But Lawrence had grown to be almost evil. Liz and Bill moved back into her mother's house. Larry Harry returns to the house a second time in June, and this time Larry Harry is rather nervous. I can't help but laugh every time I say Larry Harry. Reminds me of a Garbage Pail Kid. They walk around the property, went inside the house, and then outside. Out in the back by the bathroom window, Mr. Harry doubled over dramatically and said he had a terrible shock in the middle of his back. They went back into the kitchen and to the middle of the most active area of the house, the area between the bathroom and loo in the hallway area, and went into a trance. Bill, who was in the kitchen, could hear laughing and someone saying, "You're not a Presbyterian," twice. They were in a trance for 25 minutes, then came back to the kitchen, washed their hands, and said they had found 4 things. There was an old lady trapped in the house who couldn't get away. A mischievous young man and another young man were also there. They said that those spirits were all gone at that point, but they also found something that didn't want to go, and it said that it was a Presbyterian, but they said they could see through it. They said it was something that had been conjured up from the 16th century because of what you, meaning Bill, had done in a previous life. We're not quite sure what you had done, but for sure we know you've upset an alchemist from that time. And this plague, this witch, we'll call it, for want of a better word that you'll understand, has been stuck on you. Bill asked them how long it had been tied to him, and they told him 18 to 22 years. Bill believed them and apologized to Liz, who thought it was ridiculous that Bill was to blame. The house did get better for about a week. They moved back to Heol Fanog, but the oppressiveness was as strong as ever. In July 1990, they received 3 strange guests. Bill and Liz were not at home, as they had lunch plans with Liz's mother. They were not really communicating with Lawrence, who was as angry as ever, so he was left at home alone. Just after they left, a man in his 50s with rings covering his fingers, along with 2 women in their 20s, arrived. They were foreign, but not tourists. Lawrence met them at the door, and he said they were weird looking. They were French, and said they were registered exorcists. The man claimed he dreamed of the house and what was happening there, and the dream told him he needed to go there ASAP. They went from room to room, then went around the yard talking to themselves. They said something about a black cat and a stone cross, and that the answer lies underground. Specifically, a pagan burial ground. They went back to the hall, and the man got out a compass that began spinning and spinning. Then they left. Over the next several months, the house attracted strange, eccentric individuals. I guess that makes me strange and eccentric, because if I lived in Wales at the time, I would 100% have visited this house. All the people who visited had their own theories, but they all agreed that whatever was there was dark and growing. Bill's fingers were still split and weeping, and he couldn't paint. He went to doctor after doctor, hospitals, and even tried homeopathic ointments, but nothing helped. Then one morning he woke up, and they were healed. The mysterious ailment returned many times, each time disappearing on its own. Bill personally felt safest in the house in his studio and continued to work on his masterpiece. In July 1990, their phone was cut off, isolating them even more. Liz moved to her mother's house with baby Ben, and Bill stayed at Heol Fanog with Lawrence. The footsteps and slamming doors continued. One morning, good old Larry Harry, along with a middle-aged couple, arrived at the house. Larry had felt an inexplicable urge to visit. He thought he could help by creating what he called a psychic wall around the property. Bill was basically up for anything at this point. The couple that was with Larry Harry were mediums, and they said they uncovered the spirit of a witch. They said they knew it was a witch because she was wearing the stereotypical black hat. But I want you to take a minute on your time to look up Welsh women's hat and decide for yourself if you think what the medium saw was a witch or just a Welsh woman in a hat. They told Bill they felt the number 7 was important. One of the mediums said he saw a coven in the barn with 7 witches. The trio wandered the yard for some time. They said they felt a tremendous dark power in the land. They were convinced the house was built on a sacred site dating to pre-Christian times, possibly a pagan burial ground. Because the French exorcist had mentioned the same, Bill was intrigued, but found it hard to believe without evidence. The medium said that Heol Fanog was built on a powerful spot where 3 ley lines converged. Ley lines, if you remember from them being mentioned in previous episodes, are imaginary straight lines that connect important locations on Earth, such as historic structures, prehistoric sites, and landmarks. Once again, they mentioned Bill's curse and affirmed he was at the heart of the problem. Then they spent half an hour walking the perimeter of the property, deep in thought or in a trance, muttering. Larry Harry said the psychic wall had been erected. The group then carried out a cleansing ritual. Afterwards, Heol Fanog seemed brighter, and the oppressive feeling had lifted. In the days following, there were no strange smells, no footsteps, no feelings of being watched. At this time, Lawrence was sent away. His mother, who visited him regularly, agreed and found him a boarding house in Brecon, only about 10 minutes away. Bill was torn by the decision. It was decided if Lawrence didn't improve, they would bring him back home, and if he did improve, they would know that it was the house. Bill then received his first art commission from their neighbors, the Gandys. The Gandys owned horses and asked Bill to paint their favorite horse, a mare named Echo. Bill immersed himself in his work. He went in search of an area on the Gandys' farm to be used as the background of the painting. He found a perfect spot, and as he began to sketch, a neighboring farmer came by. The farmer shared that a blight had started in the area where lambs and calves were born blind, deformed, or deaf, and the vets were baffled. The day it started was the day the psychic wall had been erected around Heol Fanog. Bill's painting came along well, except for one of the horse's legs. No matter what Bill did, he couldn't get it quite right. When the painting was finished, he delivered it to the Gandys, who loved it. The Riches were able to get their phone turned back on, and the first call they received was from the Gandys. Mrs. Gandy told him that Echo the horse had died. It had injured the very same leg that Bill couldn't get painted right, and it died in the exact spot Bill used as a background. She also said that everything Bill had said was happening at Heol Fanog was now happening at their house. The Gandys burned the painting and never spoke to the Riches again. In August 1990, it came back. There were no footsteps or smells or temperature changes, but there was an evil presence and glimpses of the old woman. They decided to seek the help of an Anglican vicar. The vicar came to the house with 2 other men, Reverend Roy Matthews and another very tall man. While in the house, Matthews was looking disturbed. He ran to the foot of the stairs and yelled, "You can't hide from me, I can see you." Then he ran upstairs. Matthews explained he had found 3 human spirits in the house, and a 4th one that was not human, but demonic. He said it took over 15 minutes to remove it. Like before, there was a period of calm. This time it lasted 3 months, but in November of 1990 it was back. Many of the original problems disappeared with the spiritualist visit, but they were replaced by something else. They were replaced with more visual manifestations. Roy Matthews came immediately, and there was another calm, but only for a few days. At that point, Matthews said there was nothing more he could do. They began to see more apparitions. They saw someone standing in the trees in front of the house, and they went out to yell at them, but when they went out, there was no one there. They saw this figure repeatedly. Their daughter was born December of 1990. Liz's mother was there to help out with the children. She never really liked Bill a whole lot, but for some reason she developed an intense hatred of him while in the house. But the intense hatred cleared up once she left. They started glimpsing figures out of the corner of their eye. This kind of reminds me of my shadow person experience. The apparitions were infinitely more terrifying. The old woman was the only one that appeared full-on in the house. Liz began to feel as though the apparition outside the house was moving closer. After Christmas in 1990, as Liz was walking into the house and stepping into the hallway, she saw a silhouette of a 7-foot-tall man walking on the inside of the kitchen door, passing the doorway. She became totally numb. Liz went into the kitchen, and it wasn't there. She never saw any of the apparitions longer than 5 minutes. This figure was just black, but it had the feeling of being male. She put her groceries in the house and went into the barn to wait for Bill. And from that moment on, things got worse. Bill and Liz decided to move in with Liz's mother for as long as they could stand it. While they were living there, they prayed with a local vicar. Liz's mother lived over a shoe shop, and one day Liz talked with one of the workers about what was going on at Heol Fanog. The worker asked if she knew of Reverend Arthur Neal, an evangelist who had written several books on exorcism. Liz called Arthur Neal the very next day. Mr. Neal, at the time, was in his late 70s and caring for an aging wife, but he passed on the name of his colleague, David Holmwood, a Baptist minister. David Holmwood had been in Brazil prior to coming to Wales. Bill contacted Holmwood. They spoke several times, and Holmwood said he would contact the Riches when he was ready to set a date to go to Heol Fanog. During this time, Bill contacted Lawrence. He, of course, had kept in close contact with his son, but on this particular call, Lawrence was transformed. They laughed and talked and joked. Lawrence said, "You did the right thing, Dad, getting me out of that house. I don't want to talk about what happened there, but anyway, I'm better now. I'm fine. I feel like a weight has been taken off my shoulders." Later, when Bill shared his conversation with Liz, he said, "Lawrence has been saved." While you might expect that moving in with Liz's mother would prevent them from having any paranormal experiences, you'd be wrong. While they were all on edge and suspicious of any odd happenings, there were some that were completely unexplainable. There was a pool of water that appeared in the mother's house out of nowhere. There was no leak, no problem with the roof or the pipes. They cleaned it up and tried to discount it. But the next day there was another puddle on the floor. Then there was the strange pendant that Liz's mother found. It was on the floor, and it was about a 1/2 inch long, oval-shaped, and blackish green with age, and it seemed ancient. They could make out faint Egyptian-like designs. The pendant didn't belong to anyone in the house, and when Bill picked it up to look at it closer, he cried out and dropped it. When he picked it up, he had felt a sharp shock. They immediately took it outside and smashed it with a hammer. They were certain at that point that whatever was at Heol Fanog had followed them. During their stay at Liz's mother's house, Bill had to leave each day to go to Heol Fanog to feed the goats and the cat. That doesn't make any sense. Take that out. They returned to Heol Fanog in June of 1991, and David Holmwood was finally ready to visit the house. On the day Homewood was to arrive, Liz took the kids out for the day. Homewood was 55 years old and over 6 feet tall and accompanied by an American woman around 40 named Anita. Anita was a reformed Satanist who had been exorcised by Arthur Neal. On their way to the house, a large owl flew into their windshield, cracking it, which was seen as a sign that the devil was attacking them. There was no electricity at the house, and the yard was overgrown. All Homewood and Anita wanted to do was walk around and get a feel for the place. In July 1991, David Homewood and Anita appeared again and removed items from the house they determined to be portals for evil. Items included some of Bill's paintings, books, and antique brass. The items were all loaded into David's car to be taken to be burned. Bill and Liz returned to the house with their mothers and cleaned it from top to bottom. They never felt the horrible thing, but whenever they felt a presence, they called David Homewood for prayers. Bill began working on the large canvas he had in his studio, and he felt like he must complete the painting. He was sleeping in another room to prevent disturbing Liz and the baby, as he was staying up late at night painting. Then one night, Liz woke up hearing a loud snoring noise. She thought the cat was under the bed making the noise, but when she looked, the cat wasn't in the room, and the snoring was loud. She started to focus and determined that the snoring was louder than a house cat, more like a lion or tiger-sized creature, and it was coming from outside the window. As she moved toward the window, the sound stopped. She decided to get Bill, and as she ran from the room, the snoring grew louder again. She went to Bill's studio and told him what was going on. But when they returned to the room, it was silent. Liz went to sleep in another bedroom, and Bill stayed up and went to check on the noise a few times. On his third trip to the bedroom, he finally heard it. The next day, Bill and Liz's dad searched for any animal or explanation for the sound, but found nothing. The noise went on for a month. They finally called David Homewood, who said the noise was happening to him too. He prayed on the phone and they never heard the noise again. Then a man by the name of Dickie Dodds showed up after reading an article about the house. Dickie Dodds is a dowser, and he believes that Heol Fanog is haunted because of ley lines. He determined the house was built on ley lines. In fact, the area of the house with the most activity was directly over a ley line, and another line intersected at the electric meter. You'll remember that they had horrendous electric bills. Dickie told Bill that ley lines are basically neutral, but they can become contaminated by the history of a location. He also suggested Bill find out the history of the property to determine the origin of the negativity. Other dowsers visited the property, including one named Peter Davies. Davies said, "The first thing I noticed when I got to Heol Fanog was all the energy lines. There was a heck of a lot of them all around there, and most of it was harmful radiation. Very, very bad. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it was the worst of all the places I have ever dowsed in around 20 years as a dowser." Between July of 1991 and spring of 1993, the house seemed to be resting. The old woman, footsteps, and smells were all gone. There were no more sightings of the tall black figure, and the sense of evil was gone. Yet Bill and Liz still felt like something was still off with the house. It felt like something was watching and waiting. Liz was seeing dark figures amongst the trees around the house that disappeared the moment she blinked. They were also tormented with awful nightmares, and even had one shared dream where they were loading their vehicles, preparing to move to a new place. They speed off feeling relieved, then they somehow end up outside Heol Fanog again. They look up the driveway and see themselves still there, trapped inside the house, pressed against the windows, screaming. Bill's work had picked up slightly, though not in the same prestigious way as before. And Liz is pregnant again. Lawrence was flourishing. Then in the spring of 1993, Their feelings of something waiting were proven true. As Bill worked on preparing dinner, he caught movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned his head, and emerging from the hallway was a beautiful woman, tall and slender, her hands pressed in prayer. She wore a long white gown, and she had full lips and large dark eyes. The mood of the room changed the moment she appeared. Sexual tension snapped in the air. He felt the desire to follow the apparition, but was able to resist. He then went up to the nursery to tell Liz what had happened. They called Homewood, who again prayed. Since the time that David Homewood cleansed the house, Bill worked on his masterpiece like a madman. The painting was that of a man trapped in snaking tendrils that looked like arteries and veins. The summer brought more lucid dreams that stayed with Bill rather than fading away. It was a dream of a beaked or hooked-nosed figure, half man, half bird. The figure was immobile like a statue, but Bill always had the feeling of a presence. He sensed it was alive and that it was threatening. The dream came back night after night until one July afternoon in the kitchen. It was a chilly evening, though it was hot outside. He felt a presence and turned to flee the kitchen, and he saw the figure there watching him. He ran upstairs to Liz and asked her to pray with him. They prayed, but then the figure was there in the room with them, and they both saw it. Though they prayed, it still stood there watching them, and then finally left. They called David Homewood, who again prayed with them on the phone, and as they talked to Homewood on the phone, the thing came back. Homewood said he could see the same figure at his home, and they continued to pray. Homewood said he would put a wall of fire around the entity, and flames erupted from the floor, though Bill felt no heat. The thing finally disappeared. They only saw the beaked figure once more several months later, standing on a hill looking down at the house. The house atmosphere was better, but still had that foreboding sense. The Riches agreed that while David Homewood helped, he had not been able to get rid of whatever was going on. They were still fighting the local electric company over the crazy electric bills. Swallock had the line into the house checked and the meter, and nothing was wrong. Bill paid to have his appliances checked, and none of them were causing the issue either. But something was sucking up power. By the end of the summer of 1993, things seemed pretty hopeless. The evil was still there. So Liz reached out to a Dr. John Ashton from the Christian World Revival. And that is where we're going to end part 2. There will obviously be a part 3 that I'm hoping will be the final part of the series. We'll have the conclusion of Bill and Liz Rich's story, and I'll share all of the things that could have possibly caused all of the hauntings. Remember, you can find Lurk on Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. You can also find us at our website at lurkpodcast.com. All of our episodes are there, along with social media links. Don't forget to tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell everybody that you like our show. Is it a show? It's a podcast. Is a podcast a show? Anyway, tell them to listen to Lurk. And until next time, keep lurking.